hopefully you don't ask me about the tenor tuba player because he's a guest in the Marlin Symphony. What do I know?
But we digress.
Already, we just arrived.
Yeah, doesn't take long with us. Hi, I'm Robert McBride of All Classical Portland. This is Carlos Kalmar, music director of the Oregon Symphony.
Good evening, everybody.
And you must be the audience. They must be the audience.
Allegedly.
Okay. The audience for the pre-concert conversation, the audience for the actual concert will be larger.
Okay.
Yeah. And the orchestra will be considerably larger by that time, too.
Nobody
Pretty
here.
quiet up here now.
It's amazing. Our program is actually silence.
Actually, it's a very clever, creative program, very clever way to put a Haydn symphony into context. Carlos loves Joseph Haydn's music, loves the symphonies. So what he has here tonight is a program that's all about variations. It starts with the Brahms Variations on a theme by Haydn, then a Haydn symphony in which one movement is a variation form, and then the fantastic variations of a knightly character, Don Quixote by Richard Strauss, on the second half of the concert. Very clever way of wedging some Haydn in there.
Well, you know that actually I thought this is a fantastically clever program. And then while I was reading material about this concert and the pieces, I noticed to my amazement that I think it's exactly this program is being played or was being played by the Boston Symphony and their music director.
Ah.
So now I'm thinking, who stole from whom?
I was wondering that too.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes great ideas are just in the air.
Yeah, but come on, I mean, let's
Quelle
be...
coincidence.
I mean, okay, to pair Brahms Variations with Don Quixote, okay, you can come up with that, yeah. But there are 104 symphonies by Haydn, and I don't know, but probably in 15 of them there is a set of variations.
Yeah, it could be.
So why did they do number 90?
Because it's fun.
Oh yeah, it is a lot of fun.
Yeah. The Brahms Variations on a theme by Haydn is one of the great misnomers in classical music, since the theme wasn't actually by Haydn. But Brahms didn't know that, and he wrote this wonderful set of variations. And he wrote two different versions of the piece at the same time. As he wrote the orchestral version we'll hear tonight, he also was writing the version for two pianos. And I think that would be such a fun thing for a composer to do, these two different versions at the same time. I would love to get inside his head and think what he was thinking and hear what he was hearing as he did that.
Well, as you know, I prefer not to get into the head of especially Johannes Brahms because he scares me. But the interesting thing is that, okay, I think that he started with the variations for piano because he was thinking about a piece, mainly, I wouldn't say for his own amusement, but a piece for him and Clara Schumann. That was actually the reason. And then the strange thing is, all these things that I read that actually he asked his publisher, Fritz Simrock, please send also paper for orchestral scores. Because I first of all, I thought, what kind of a strange question is that? And then I remembered, wait a second, this is before 1900. Way before, so you couldn't just get to the shop on the corner and say, hey, I need a large piece of paper in which I write orchestral music.
You had to get it from your publisher. What if you didn't have a publisher?
Well, you were in trouble.
Well, interesting. I didn't know that.
I don't know whether that is exactly, but I know that there exists a letter in which he asks for, send more paper, bigger paper, so I can write a lot of systems. And then he wrote both pieces side by side. And I have actually never heard the piano version.
I've never heard it live, but I listened to a recording of it today with Martha Argerich and Nelson Frere.
They know what to do.
At the Salzburg Festival, and it's so beautiful. is so beautiful.
Yeah, but ultimately I'm sure that even with two fantastic players, I would miss certain things. The colors of an orchestra, and we're talking about Johannes Brahms, who actually was not an innovator at all. I mean, neither in form, nor in his musical output, nor in orchestration. He just, it's actually fascinating to me that a composer like Johannes Brahms made it into all our minds until this day, and we all say it's rightly so, because he was actually a backwards thinking guy, and other music lovers of the time actually mocked him because of his thinking, because music lovers of his time were, of course, more in the corner of Richard Wagner, who did something that is so innovative. And then there was Johannes Brahms, and he wrote sonatas and was stubborn. It has to be this form. And one of the musical architectures that he liked the most was actually variations. He wrote quite a bit of those. So here is one of them. And probably what attracted him in terms of the chorale by Haydn, that is not by Haydn, was that it's written in uneven meters. That means, if you look at this building has a clear middle, and every side is equal. Well, otherwise probably a building comes crashing down. And in music, sometimes the architecture can be a little bit different, and this is one of those pieces. Now, there are basically two ways to write variations on a theme, because what Strauss writes is actually different. One is you put out a theme, and then you start to fiddle around with the theme in terms of adding notes here and there. And then there is the other form, which is you just take the theme and create with each variation something like a very different character. And the theme becomes kind of it's kind of sometimes far away. And that is what Brahms does. And he writes all these variations, and at the end he writes, it wouldn't be Brahms if he wouldn't recur in the finale to a form, again, you heard me saying he's backwards thinking, of a form that it was used in the Baroque era. The finale is a passacaglia. I didn't count how many times. A passacaglia is where a theme, mostly in the bass, a line is repeated over and over and over and over and over. I think in the symphony number 4, it's 32 times. You don't notice that it is 32 times, and here it's probably a little bit less, shorter. Great piece.
I've always thought that this piece would be magnificent for a ballet. The curtain is down for that stately opening. The curtain rises for the first variation. There's the company. And there are so many different characters. Some are masculine, some are feminine, some are fast, some are more slow. So you could have, pairs and trios of dancers and women here and men there. And then in the end, for that big finale, the entire company on stage. It would be glorious. Have you ever thought about doing any choreography?
Well,
I set you up, didn't I?
You know what you're talking about.
Body Vox. He's choreographing for Body Vox.
No. Okay. The next show of Body Vox, I mean, I'm lobbying for my friends at Body Vox and for Jamie and Ashley, who are the leaders there. Jamie called me and said, hey, Carlos, we have a very weird idea at Body Vox. We are inviting several personalities and artists we know to choreograph a little piece. Would you be interested in doing something? And I thought, you are just crazy, Jamie. And then I said, okay, but only if my wife helps me.
So I think that's a really smart answer.
Delegate. So, yeah, it's happening.
Oh, I can't wait
but
to
I would,
see it.
I don't know what all the other choreographers who are not choreographers what they did, because essentially to choreograph specifically is really hard, and I wouldn't know what to do with that. It's more you bring an idea and you throw the idea at the dancers and at the company, and they take it and work with it, and then you say, little bit of this, little bit of that, stuff like that. And that's how, in our case, a choreography happens. So there will be a choreography by Rafael and myself.
What a wacky, crazy idea. Bodivox. It's called the Pearl Dive Project, and it's opening in a couple of weeks. I don't remember.
It's April 7.
Okay, now you know. And if you've never been in the Bodivox facility in Northwest Portland, you'll love it. It's so great. This wonderful old building that they acquired and completely rebuilt and made it their own. But we digress. But I thought you would want to know about Carlos dipping his toe in the choreographic waters.
Yeah, what I do when I have time.
And then there are Haydn symphonies, such as, number 90 in C major, for example. This is yet another Haydn symphony that I've never heard in concert, but I will finally get to hear it tonight, thanks to you. And Haydn's famous for his wit, and this symphony certainly shows that. Often the endings of his symphonies are funny, or they have you on the edge of your seat or something. This one's maybe the most bizarre of all those endings.
Leave it at that.
Okay, so.
I mean, it's kind of hard to talk.
Well, you don't want to give it away.
No.
Yeah. All right, let me put it in music theory terms.
Okay.
Kind of. The Further Adventures of Supertonic. Leave it at that.
Yeah, because any explanation, I know now since you came to this, and I don't remember what is in the program notes.
Not much.
Great. Great, because all I ask you to do is just... No, it's not about just listen, because then you're going to think, I don't want... No, just do what you think you need to do.
This one's hard even not to talk about. Amazing.
Yeah, but if you say what actually happens...
Okay, well, let's talk about the rest. Okay, so C major symphony. C major in Haydn's time is often fun and festive, and that's the case with this. So you get some timpani and some brass, and you get those variations in the second movement. The way it begins even is interesting, because like a lot of Haydn symphonies, it begins with a slow introduction, but he actually kind of morphs that right into the beginning of the movement. That it's not a stately introduction for the sake of a stately introduction, and then he launches into something else. It just kind of segues.
Actually, the fascinating thing that I always see in the greatest classical music ever written is the simplicity of the themes. It is...
And then how you take that and run with it for 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, and you realize that actually the piece could not be any different. Or if it would be any different, it wouldn't be as good as. So what happens is there is a beginning like this, and then he starts, and in the bar 3, you hear a theme very slowly. And then, as in every Haydn, in the late Haydn symphonies, you hear it starts slowly and then gets into the fast part of the first movement. Now, the fast part is actually a repetition of the third bar, just fast. And you are like, you don't realize that immediately. And even how simple all this is, and nobody could actually write anything like this. So essentially, this is a very fun movement, and then comes the second movement. And in the second movement, mainly, a little bit in the third, we decided to use a kind of technique. To some extent, I can say it's a technique, which is a little bit unusual in orchestra playing, which is improvisation. So what happens in the second movement is there is a magnificent theme, and Robert already explained it's a set of variations. Now, these variations are all written out, but there are actually just repetitions with a little more underneath, just stuff. And so I told my leading three woodwind players, to actually make something up.
That's wonderful.
And they can. Because actually what I said was, Martha, our principal, I said, Martha, can you just invent something? And she was like, really? Okay, and then I said, because the way it works, flute is first, oboe is after her, mostly. And I said to Marty, our principal oboe, whenever she does something, you just go with it and repeat it. Or you try to top it. And there, oh yeah, and so, I mean, they make all of us smile.
I've never heard of an orchestra, modern orchestra, doing that. This is going to be so much fun.
It's little things.
Sure.
Just a little here and there. Yeah. But that is the second movement, aside from, well, it's, oh, I could go into details, but let's leave it at that. And then we come to the third movement, which is a classic Haydn minuet, nothing else. Haydn minuets are just a minuet, a trio, we go back into a minuet. And then comes this finale we try to not talk about, which is just, it's, you know how it works? Essentially, I can really say what it is. It is one of those fast-paced pieces of music that try to somehow amuse you with the speed and with a little bit here in color and with just the classical force. And then it ends and we're all happy.
And then there's intermission.
Yep.
You can drink up if you like. Prepare yourself for Don Quixote, Don Quixote, Don Quixote, however you want to pronounce the guy's name. It's the Cervantes novel about the kind of loopy knight-errant guy and his sidekick, Sancho Panza, thank you, turned into music. It was kind of like this 40-minute cartoon without the cartoon. And like Haydn, Strauss was endlessly inventive. And it's amazing to me that the guy would even take the time to write 40 minutes of this kind of fun music, telling this wacky, weird story. But he was so adept, so facile at composing that it wouldn't take him that much time compared to some other composers. He would just do it.
Yeah, things just flow with Strauss. Well, the thing about Don Quixote by Richard Strauss that always amazes me is there is, in terms of what Strauss usually writes, Strauss, interesting composer. On one side, there are his operas.
15 of them.
Yeah, and some of them are the greatest operas written during Strauss' time. No, not even a question. Amazing music. And then there are all these tone poems that he writes, including his symphony called Aus from Italy, which is also essentially a tone poem. And I think those divide themselves in, I have way too many ideas, and those essentially have a couple of ideas, let me stretch them. And this Don Quixote is actually in, I have way too many ideas. It's not so that you cannot follow the ideas, but this is a piece that you definitely should hear a couple of times just to grasp all the things that he does. Just to give you an example, so we all know that Don Quixote is actually this slightly elderly man who has read way too many knightly novels and has essentially lost his mind. And imagines things. And so what will happen is there will be an introduction. This introduction, musical introduction, is probably 4 minutes, give or take. And only after that, the cello, which is Don Quixote, actually starts to play. So what happens in those 4 minutes is already like completely wacky, because how do you actually describe that a person has, in a very caring, wonderful way, has lost his mind? And Strauss does something. He uses mutes for most of the instruments so that the sound is not as concrete as you think, and the melodies fade a little bit. They trickle down, and you think like, oh, where did it go? And then all of a sudden, in the middle of that, happens one of the best themes that Strauss wrote for the oboe, and that is Dulcinea, the lady who he loves and admires. And then already happens kind of the first battle and stuff like that. And all of that before the cello actually starts. And then there is a set of variations that each of them has something at least very witty. Most of them are very funny. One of the funniest is the second variation, where Don Quixote goes to battle against the army of somebody whose name escapes me and I wouldn't be able to pronounce it. And essentially he's battling a flock of sheep. And you can hear it. And that reminds me that, because we have to at least mention the fact that what you're going to hear is a set of variations that are very far removed from Brahms. At the beginning of the concert, Brahms has a theme, writes variations. Strauss essentially has a story, not a theme so much, and writes variation. And Strauss himself said that I need, in order to get my brain going, I need actually a story, which is something that Brahms would have absolutely despised, wouldn't have crossed his mind. And of course, Strauss, being the great master of program music, he got heavily criticized by the conservative critics of that time, because they said, why can't you just write music? Why do you need actually poetry, a story, a ballad, whatever, a painting? Why do you need that? And the reviewers specifically criticized the second variation of the sheep, because imagine yourself surrounded by 100 sheep who are all meh. That's how it will sound. So it doesn't sound very pretty. Or you hear him battling the windmills, one of the famous scenes, and you actually can hear when he's defeated and falls off his horse. You can hear it. There is definitely one very serious variation right in the middle of the piece where he's a little more reflective and thinks about knighthood and the knight and Dulcinea. There is another one. There's another one which is really funny, started by the oboes in uneven meters. And it's because Sancho Panza, his helper, he's playing a prank on Don Quixote and tells him, that girl over there, that's actually your love, Dulcinea, and it's just a country girl of some sorts. And all of that, and they ride a horse through the air, and you hear the windmill on stage, and another this, and just the two little episodes where you can actually say it that way, religion is involved. Brilliant. The first one, you actually start to hear something like a procession coming closer, and it's when Don Quixote imagines that this procession is going to steal the statue of the Virgin Mary, so he has to charge against him, and you hear it. Or the other one, even way at the end of the It's before the last variation, where he's kind of ready for another battle, and he sees two monks. And he actually imagines those monks are wizards, so he battles them too. And then comes the last variation, and he's kind of, it works a little bit like, hey Don Quixote, it's okay. Leave the imagination at home, come home, everything is okay. And he comes home, and then he dies. Very peaceful, very moving death.
Death is something that Strauss wrote about pretty well in other cases too. So a lot of cello solos representing the title character. And of course, the better you know Cervantes' novel, the more sense all of this makes, but you don't have to know all. I've never read it, I just know these bullet points. There are a lot of viola solos that represent the sidekick, but sometimes he's represented by other instruments too. And yes, there is a wind machine when they imagine that they're flying through the air. So the cello part is so involved that very often guest cellists come to town to play it, the same way you would hire somebody to play a cello concerto. It's kind of a concerto. So Christian Poltera, he showed me, he has one of the 20 good Stradivarius cellos, and he showed me, he's shown you those, the pictures of what this thing looked like after it was destroyed in a shipwreck. And did you ever make model cars? You know, you have all these little pieces in plastic and you lay them all out, and then that's what it looked like. And somebody put the thing back together, and you're going to see it and hear it tonight. It's incredible.
I mean, if you have a good instrument at home, I'm not saying that if you fall down the stairs, God forbid, and the instrument is destroyed, never mind, it's going to be fixed. It's not about that. But essentially, just thinking that one of the best instruments made in history was actually on the bottom of the sea for a while, and then got pulled up, and it was in pieces, completely. Essentially, I mean, I'm a musician, but probably I would have thought, oh, darn. And then I would have opened the garbage bin. Well, probably I would have known that the name Stradivarius is as such, so I probably would not have opened the garbage. But essentially, you throw it away. But no, in those days, and even today, they just took it to a magnificent cello maker, and they restored. It took 2 years to restore, and it's a fantastic instrument, and you cannot see it.
And you get to hear this thing and see this thing tonight. It's a rare opportunity.
By Stradivarius?
Yes,
Yes.
it's a Strat, yeah.
Reconstituted?
Yeah. No, Stradivarius was long dead. Okay. Stradivarius, I don't know exactly when this instrument was built, but it's late 1600s, early 1700s. And it was on the bottom of the sea, 1930, something
20s,
like
30s,
that.
something
20s,
like that.
30s.
Right. This is going to be a very interesting concert. Thank you for cooking this one up. Carlos Calmer.
Robert McBride.
And the audience.